This video is in response to a couple of comments that were left on the channel, one of which is going to be informative, so we'll do that one first. 1 in 10,000 cases of a specific type of infection can have a specific type of syndrome. There's lots of syndromes out there. One of these syndromes is called Guillain-Barré syndrome. The cases are usually caused by influenza or hepatitis E or dengue virus or Zika virus or Zostra virus, Epstein-Barr cytomegalovirus, I can't pronounce it, it's a bacterial infection, or another one that's a form of pneumonia causing bacteria. These cause a reaction in the body where the nervous system is damaged in the peripheral nervous system or the central nervous system, depending. They're usually caused from an infection in the upper respiratory system or the digestive system. Blah, blah. It's a syndrome that causes nerve damage, period, full stop. It can cause weakness and difficulty breathing, all sorts of crap happening to you. Because diseases, like viruses, can infect any cell, except maybe the brain. Bacterial infections can eat their way into anything. And if they go along the sheaths of the nerve bundles, they can damage them. That seems really obvious. But someone decided to say that this was caused by, without including all this, vaccinations. Because anti-vaxxers have to point to the homeopathy method, alt-med, alt-reality version of medicine. So let's review this. It's 1 in 10,000 cases to 5 in 10,000 cases on the extreme end. And it's usually caused by any virus you want to think up at this point, because they just randomly decide to attack nerve bundles. This can also happen with COVID-19, but we haven't got any cases yet because it's 1 in 10,000 cases. I'm sorry, but if you've just gotten over COVID-19, this may be one of the more minor problems compared to not dying. But anyway, let's get on with this. How often does vaccines cause this? Well, vaccines can cause a similar reaction if A, the body overreacts. Instead of just becoming immune to something, it goes crazy. That means you probably have an autoimmune disorder. Or next, live versions of the virus are used, or only weakened or damaged versions, like partially sterilized versions of the virus, or a weakened strain where you've altered it enough to where it can't really infect a person. And in order to avoid these infections that could cause it, because that's the one we're talking about right now only, not just the overreaction of your nervous system or your immune system, excuse me, is you demand that if I get a vaccine, it has to be a vaccine that is not active. It cannot be live disease. It cannot be live virus or bacteria. And they say, okay, that's the other bottle. It's not as effective. I don't care. Just give me that one because I don't want it. You don't even have to have a reason for it. That's called informed consent to you. What did the vaccine people tell you? Oh, if you have this condition, it was caused by a vaccine. The vaccines cause it 1 in a million times. The disease causes it 1 in 10,000 times. So the only time you can have it, of course, has to be vaccines because it's less likely. Gee, that does kind of ruin things, doesn't it? Now, the only time that this would be caused primarily by vaccines is if the disease isn't happening in the area. Getting a vaccine for something that doesn't happen in the United States, when you're going to an area that it's all over the place, like let's say, hepatitis E, if there is a vaccine for it. I don't even know if there is one. If I'm going in an area where polio is going everywhere and can cause paralysis in children, I want my kids, if I'm taking them with me, which I wouldn't do, to be immunized because it's highly likely. However, if we're not getting polio in the United States at all, the vaccine can cause that kind of reaction. So in order to prevent it from happening, you give them a dead vaccine, which we do. You don't give them live vaccine because there's no point. The risk is too high. And by the way, the dead vaccine has a reduction to 1 in 10 million instead of 1 in a million damage. So now we're talking out of the entire population of the United States, if it's 1 in a million, you'd have 300 cases per round of people getting immunized, or the total number. But we found 1,000 cases, and there are probably people who got the disease because it's still running around somewhere, and the disease causes it a lot more often. But this is something that's so rare you probably have never heard of it. Getting paralyzed by polio is pretty fucking common. Getting this as 1 case in 10,000? Kind of unusual to hear about it. Did you hear of this before? Just saying, you've been informed. But anti-vax people want you uninformed so you can get the disease, which is much more often, And it absolutely causes it much more often than the vaccine does. Because anti-vaxxers don't give a shit if you get a disease. They just don't want you to prevent it. And I want to point out a shit ton of people on the internet claiming to be anti-vaxxers, or making sure that you think they are, who seem to be from, apparently, breadbasket America, just the, they're the perfect Americans, are actually people in other countries who want the disease level in the United States jacked up because they hate the United States. They want us to be a shithole. Next, someone claiming I'm an hypocrite by quoting me, and they're totally quoting me accurately. Let's see what their quotes are. Let's look for those quotation marks. No one has the right to challenge law in any other language other than that which is chosen by those in charge. Let me read it directly again. No one has the right to challenge the law in any other language other than that which those in charge have chosen. Now, someone did a very... You notice how grammatically clumsy, and this is the quote. This is what I've said. The direct quote. I'm having trouble even reading it. So that indicates, A, someone is quoting me verbatim somehow. Or B, they're lying through their fucking teeth about what I said. Now, this is a tactic. A person will just say something that's just flat out not true. So you'll point it out first thing. So I've done what you've expected, so you can now cat-like type your response. Obviously misquoted me. No one has the right to alter the law's interpretation by using a made-up language like Klingon, is the actual quote I did. That's not the direct quote. That's what I said. Those in charge haven't chosen this. In the past, if you're not aware of it, in the extreme past, in the before time, most laws were written deliberately in an aristocracy, elitism, drain the swamp reference, obviously, that I'm making here, language like Latin or some other language. It could be Italian. Of course, if you're in Italy, that makes sense. In the United States, people would write things out in Latin as a language that they could use as a special purpose language to maybe hide details from you and me. Not dog Latin. Latin. Dog Latin is like me saying the Roadrunner is Maximus Fasticus. That's not really Latin. It just sounds like Latin a little bit, and it's mostly a joke. That's called dog Latin. Dog Latin is not really Latin. Latin is being claimed by some people to be now dog Latin because they don't like the fact that laws originally were written that way in some cases. Not always. Now, there was this major paradigm shift called America where everybody said, why are you quoting shit back in a foreign language? This is America. Write your rules and laws in English. That has been going on for a long damn time. We still use habeas corpus and prima facie as expressions. But you know what you can do in a courtroom? If there is a jury specifically, but it also works for you. You can say, hello, I have a complaint, or point of order. That's not how we do it here. Are you going to listen to me make my request or not? Now, at this point, you're dealing with a defendant at this who's defending himself. No lawyer. The judge might admonish you, you're supposed to get a lawyer, and then you say, am I permitted to ask you a question, yes or no? You're allowed to do that to a judge. You're out of order. The instant you accuse me, you have to say this, the instant you accuse me of contempt of court, you're demonstrating a reason to have it. Am I allowed to ask you a question, or are you forbidding it? Yes, you are allowed. Thank you for acknowledging my right. I demand that the court forbid foreign languages other than English. You can say English is a foreign language. He has to ask you why. Because I don't speak fucking Latin, and neither does the jury. Ask the jury if they speak Latin. Do any of you speak Latin? No. Latin as a language is forbidden in the courtroom. You cannot say habeas corpus, and you cannot say prima facie. You have to explain in context what you're saying. This is an extremely simple instruction to all you quantum grammar Nazis. Or you can show up and say, I want everything in Klingon, or I want everything in Mexican. It's actually Spanish, but let's say I showed up in court and said, I want you to interpret all of this in Spanish. No. Going on, well, I want you to explain why. Because this is the United States and we speak fucking English. Bitch. And then they move on. And the instant you say, I want you to speak it in a language I've invented out of my butt called quantum grammar, they say, we don't have to. Well, it's a reinterpretation of the English language. I'm saying no, I have ruled, shut up. I'm going to keep whining. You are not permitted to represent yourself because A, you're in contempt, B, you're an idiot, C, you're incapable of representing anyone else or yourself in court. What you're doing is you're stating that the person is incompetent to act as a lawyer for anybody, including themselves, which is a legitimate complaint. You're nagging the court and you're demanding something that has been ruled against you. The rules in court are that the judge can say you can't demand everything be in Swahili. Swahili is actually much more commonly learned in school than Latin. I don't know if you know that. Lots of football players can speak Swahili because it's a fucking gimme course. You could do it in Swahili easier. If you say in the room, no one in the room speaks English fluently, are we allowed to use Spanish? How many people in the room speak Spanish fluently? If everybody raises their hand, the entire case is done in Spanish if you want. If the prosecutor complains, he's told to get a Spanish-speaking prosecutor and shut the fuck up because the majority rules in the United States. Those are actual examples that have happened because the point in court is to find out what's fucking happened and whether someone's really guilty or not, at least as far as we're concerned. Get a jury every time. Have I wasted your time telling you that you're allowed to say you can't use Latin in the courtroom? Next person. Dog Latin is a specialized language apparently only understood by those who are taught it, and it's used by all bar members. Number one, they don't use Dog Latin. They use Latinized expressions. It's not really Dog Latin. It's habeas corpus, not habeas, that's all folks. Okay? It's Latin. Number one. Number two, the bar members are required to know Latin so they can know what the expressions are, but they are also required to know the language they're speaking in the room. If you're in France, you have to use French. If you're in the United States, you have to use English. If you're in some parts of Canada, you have to use French. Yes, I'm using that as an example. And in southern United States, if everybody in the room speaks Spanish fluently and nobody really speaks English very well, you can demand it be in Spanish. Because it's about not muddying the waters with a lack of communication skills. Meanwhile, David Wynn Miller and other cunts like him show up in court and say, I want you to use a language only I know. Why the fuck would that fly? But it's a reinterpretation of English. So's binary. I don't hear everybody going, Nobody needs modem speak. Your argument's invalid because it's fucking stupid. The majority of people in the United States have decided that in a courtroom we can have a jury of our peers, and also, due to precedent, we are allowed to demand that no Latin be spoken. Or Spanish if we want. Does anybody in here not understand English fluently? No. Then you have to speak English. You can actually do that in a courtroom. If only one person in the room, it's one goddamn person, like one witness, keeps speaking Spanish, but they can speak English, you tell them you have to do everything in English. That's actually happened in court too. Everybody in the room needs to know what's going on. If they don't have a common language, you're going to have to use interpreters. But if the majority of them do, or all of them do, speak one language, you use the one they can use. And again, it could be Spanish, English, or French. Canadians. So here. Your statement is that I said that no one has the right to challenge law. I didn't say that. In any other language. No, I did not say that. Except the one that has been chosen by those in charge. No, it's the one that everybody can speak in the room. What I did say is you're not allowed to come in with a misinterpretation of English that changes depending on what you're trying to prove. For the same reason that saying habeas corpus isn't a specific meaning. It has a specific legal meaning, but depending on what you're talking about, it doesn't mean that. So you just tell them stop using Latin. Stop being lazy. Dog Latin is not used by all bar members. They actually have to learn some Latin. Why can't Wynn's language rules be taught instead? You have to teach a whole room how to speak a language unnecessarily? No. His language is not that different language than the first. It's only a set of rules for structure to give clear meanings, blah, blah, blah. I require everybody use the same time and date stamp when they deal with me. That doesn't mean they have to obey it. You're demanding one person in the room tell everybody else to learn a new language before they can even do the case. No. Why do this on purpose to allow them to mold meaning, blah, blah, blah? Your accusation about that other side using Dog Latin actually just applies to you. You guys have come up with a bullshit language worse than Klingon and less sensible and less useful. And again, Swahili, damn it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. and goodbye.